welcome to our lesson on the TI-84 Plus CE student course. In this video we are focusing on graphing and in particular the Inequality graphing app. And some of the things we are going to look at are how to access the Inequality graphing app, which is called Inequals, how to enter and plot various inequalities, and how to find key points such as intersections and how to store them. Now if I'm in normal graphing mode, and we can see that here, and I have two lines already drawn, which are these, we can see that there's no ability at the moment to change that to an inequality. We can actually do some shading, and I'll just demonstrate that for you now by choosing the shading. So it's sort of a form of inequalities and shading, but it doesn't actually allow us to really understand the inequality feature of it. And equally, it doesn't allow us to type any x equals or inequalities involving just x alone. So we can see that that produces this graph, and we can still find intersects, and it gives us an idea of what's going on, but I want us to focus on the Inequalities app. So these are the four inequalities I'm going to use for this lesson. And for me to type those in as inequalities, I'm going to use the Inequals app. And that can be found in Apps, and in my case, number 7. Press any key, and you'll notice that the whole structure of the y equals page has changed. It's changed now to having an extra bit in the header. I've now got an x equals here and a quit app. And also when I come over to the line itself, I can now change the inequalities in here, and the shading automatically happens for me. So that y equals 0 that I wanted to do, I can now, y greater than or equals to 0, I can now do very easily on here. Notice when typing these in, I've used the fraction button, which can be found in Alpha X, and also be made mindful to keep the y as positive and adjust the inequalities accordingly. And I'm just going to come up and go into the X one. This is a nice little feature with the Inequalities app that only works with the Inequalities app. And in this case, we had that x was greater than or equal to 1. So I can also include that one as well. And if I now press graph, just as I would normally do, we can see there's loads of shading that happens. And in most questions, they would set the window up for us. The shade res will determine how much of a shading you actually have on the graph. In my case, I'm just going to keep it fairly hollow, so hence the reason why it's 6. But if you wanted it more solid, you'd decrease that number. And we can see now that it's just shaded everything. And normally we say, well, okay, it's where all the shadings are, and we can sort of see it's here. But there'd be a much nicer way of doing that is to sort of shade just that section alone. And for us to do that, we go into the traditional calc that we normally do, and here's all our normal calc stuff. But if we come across, we've seen there's another one at the header called Inequality. And there we can therefore find where the inequalities intersect. And we can now see that it will nicely delete them all as we go, and it will now show us the highlighted region in which we want for this inequality sets of equations. Now in most questions we're interested in the key intersection points, which are here, 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 and then the very bottom. There's 4 of them. And for us to get those values, it's very simple. Go back into calc again, across to inequality, and that's number 1, the point of interest trace, and it will tell us them all. Well, that's one of the ones we want. And the really nice thing we can do with this is store this in our list. So I'm just going to press store. Let's press enter to get out of that. And now I can find the next one. That one over there is not important to us. I'm going to leave that one. That one there is. So I'm going to press store on that one too. And again, arrow across. We've just done that one. And notice that it just jumps around because it's staying on Y1. So then we jump down to Y2 and arrow across again to find other key points of interest. That one's now stored. And I want to now go on to the black line, so I'm going to arrow down again to the black line, Y3, and arrow across to find all those key points of interest, and I want this one up here. I'm now going to store that. The really nice thing about that is if I now then go into my stat edit, then there are those 4 key points stored in the lists. So sometimes we will just use these points as they are, but sometimes we'll actually want to work out a max or a min for these points. And we can actually do that by giving it going into a third list. Let's just call it M for now. Can't be bothered to do anything more complex. And we can do a calculation in here. Let's say it's 3 of the X values and 2 of the Y values. We can simply go 3, choosing list, and there it is now, 3 of the x, and let's say it's plus 2 of the y. And then if we press enter, it will give us the answers to 3 of x values and 2 of the y values, and we can work out which is the best for the max and min. A really nice little feature. The last few things that you may want to be aware of is sometimes we want points inside this region, not just on the lines themselves. And a nice way for you to be able to see that visually would be to go into Format and add some grid lines. The light grey may be okay for you to see them. So if we press Graph, and we're going to have to go back into Calc and go across the inequalities and do the intersection of those. And we can see that there's actually these key points that we can see in here in the graph, and they would actually be useful for us to work out as well if we needed to. And the last thing is sometimes students go, well, I'm in this mode and I don't want to be in this mode anymore. How do I get out of it? Well, that's very simple. Just come up to the top here, come across to Quit App, do what it asks, which is number 2, and there we go. We're now out of that. We've now got them back as normal straight lines and equations, and there's no shading happening with those at all. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you found that useful, and all the best with your lessons.